I'm always on the lookout for unique and interesting items at the thrift store, such as an unusually large square light bulb. You don't see them in that shape anymore. And someone's mellow rock mixtape on reel-to-reel. But I also appreciate finding the mundane items that you see every day in your life, but you never really think about until you get the opportunity to own one for yourself. Like a receipt printer. I found a modern receipt printer at the thrift store almost exactly a year ago and made a video about it. I call it modern even though it was probably at least a decade old because other than using a parallel port, it's functionally identical to the ones that are still being made today. But this one is considerably larger, older, and noisier, so it's also considerably more appealing to me. I paid $15 for it, and for that price it included the printer itself, the power supply, which someone put a sticker on it saying Epson printer, an extra long parallel port cable, which by itself is worth at least $15, and also it included the paper and the ribbon. And the mere fact that this uses a ribbon may already let you know there's something special about it that you don't see on modern receipt printers. It is quite dirty and has plenty of Scotch tape residue on it. It's model M133A, and this must have been someone's password, including a caret symbol, which they wrote Hold Shift 6 to instruct the person on how to type a caret. You can see it uses a parallel port with the Centronics connector, so that's just a standard parallel port just like any normal printer from the 80s or 90s. And there's the power supply connector, which is unique. If I can disconnect it. Come on. There we go. Yeah, you're not going to find one of those unless it came with it. It also has what looks like a telephone or Ethernet jack. That's actually for connecting it to a cash drawer so that when it prints out the receipt, it automatically opens the cash drawer. Unfortunately, I don't have a cash drawer, nor have I practiced the dance move where you slam it closed with your hip. But I did notice that there's an extra bonus of this printer. It's not just a receipt printer, it's also a validation printer. You may have seen these used by bank tellers where they can stick in a check or some kind of slip of paper and it prints on that and then you just take it out, and that's an extra bonus. It's a validation printer, not just a receipt printer. There are the controls and indicators on the front. The release button is used by the validation printer function, and there's the power switch. I cleaned it up a bit and now we're ready to test it out. You do that by holding down the feed button while you turn it on. It printed out some information about its configuration. It's version 1.05. It's a parallel interface, a 4K buffer, and it can do either 40 or 33 characters per line. And it's waiting for me to press the feed button. I think that'll go on forever, so I turned it off. I'll turn it back on and feed it a little bit and tear it off. And now you can see the interesting thing about this, it didn't print out just one piece of paper. It printed out two. That's because it does an automatic carbon copy. So you can get one receipt as the customer and the store can keep the other receipt for their records. You can see it uses a concentric spool of the regular white paper and the pressure sensitive yellow paper. And this is why dot matrix receipt printers still exist for some applications, even though thermal receipt printers are a lot cheaper and cost less to maintain because you never have to replace the ribbon. In this case, the top layer of paper uses an ordinary ink ribbon, that's what you see here. But the bottom layer is pressure sensitive, so if I take a piece of plastic and just scribble on the top piece, you don't see anything there until I take it off, and now you can see the mark on the bottom piece. This is actually referred to as carbonless copy paper because it does not need that sheet of carbon between the top and bottom layers as old-fashioned carbon copy paper does.
'Cause you put a piece of carbon paper under your heart and gave me just a copy of your love.
Carbonless copy paper has micro-encapsulated dye on the bottom of the top sheet and a clay coating on the top of the bottom sheet. So when you press down on it or the printer hammers on it with its dot matrix printing, it breaks those micro-encapsulated ink particles on the bottom of the top sheet and transfers it to the clay coating on the top of the bottom sheet. Just don't get a paper cut with this paper because then you'll be clay aching. Now I have the Epson receipt printer connected to my ThinkPad X60, which is my newest currently working computer with a parallel port on its attached docking base. It's running Windows XP, and if I go to Printers and Faxes and go to Add Printer and just go through the plug and play printer detection, it does detect the printer. It says Epson TMP 2.01, and it offers to install the driver for it. See there, Epson TMP 2.01. I'll tell it to install the software automatically, and it tries to, but it says it can't install this hardware. It can't find the necessary software. Epson still has the drivers for it on their website, but even though the driver claims to support Windows XP, every time I try to install it on multiple different computers, I get this error message saying that failed to install common modules, error code 1601. It also says the Windows installer service could not be accessed. I looked up that message, and Microsoft on their website has a patch that supposedly would fix that problem, but I tried that and it didn't work. I'm admitting defeat at trying to get it to work with anything close to a modern computer, so I connected it to my vintage Tandy 1100 FD laptop. I'm using the DeskMate word processor that it has built into ROM, and I typed in a simple document, and if I go to print it, it works perfectly. I'm using the standard ASCII printer driver, and I set the line width to 40 columns, and it came out perfectly fine. You can see that is the 40 column width of the printing, and it's just standard text, so it looks okay. And it's great for use of vintage computers which have a 40 column screen, because when you print out a program listing, the line wrapping will match exactly how it is on the screen, which makes it easier to spot mistakes. And it supports the upper ASCII character set, including the graphical characters used by the IBM PC. I wanted to see if it would support the same escape codes as an old Epson dot matrix printer from the 1980s, because back then Epson's printers were so common that they pretty much became a universal standard for dot matrix printers, and everyone else tried to emulate an Epson printer. So I set DeskMate to the IBM graphic printer driver because IBM printers that they equipped with their PC were just rebranded Epsons. And you can see I added bold and underline to a couple of the words. And it kind of worked. The printing did become darker on the word that was supposed to be in bold, although for some reason it dropped the E from Epson and it kept being bold even when it was not supposed to be, and then it started overwriting the next line. But then you can see it did underline the words that were supposed to be underlined. So it looks like at least the underlining part of it would work, even if the bold didn't really work correctly. And I'm impressed that even that much of it still works, because this printer is actually deceptively new. It blends right in with this laptop from 1989, but this is actually from the mid to late 2000s, because they also offered this with a USB port, with an Ethernet port, and even with built-in Wi-Fi. There was an interchangeable module so that instead of just serial or parallel, you can get all sorts of different interfaces for this printer. And do you remember one of these things? A bank book. Whenever you wanted to make a deposit or withdrawal to your account, you take your bank book to the bank, and the teller would stick it in a printer just like this and give you a dot matrix printout of the transaction. And that works something like this. This printer definitely needs a new ribbon, and I didn't get it lined up exactly perfectly, but you get the idea. So I've had fun demonstrating this Epson dot matrix receipt printer, which isn't really as old as it looks, and unlike that modern thermal receipt printer, which didn't really hold my interest and I ended up giving it away, I think this one is a keeper.